Florida. Okay. Um, I was fortunate to meet this lady named Brandy Christofoli, and she spoke on human trafficking. Her youngest sister was trafficked when she was a young girl. They never got her back, and eventually she died. She was murdered or committed suicide. She really didn't say. Brandy has an organization in Florida called Life Recaptured and Your Impact. So at the end, I want to give a plug for what she does down there. That's her. I met her. She's a fantastic lady who has an agency where she takes the girls in. They actually live there, work in shops, get retrained, they get therapy, they re-enter the human race after what they've been through. And in human trafficking, it's important to say these girls can be sold 30 times a day. And it's not just sexual. I'm not going to just read. I'm going to make it interesting. It's labor force all over the world. It is the statistics vary, but it's at least 40.3 million people per year, men, women, and children. But there are many more women and children. And children, what I can gather, again, statistics vary, make up from 25 to 50% of the population, the average age being 11 to 13 years of age, if you can imagine. And they snatch these people from all over. I want to give a plug in New Jersey. I heard from a girl who works for Child Help, the Cherry Hill Mall. She had a friend on a task force, is under surveillance constantly because they were taking so many people from the Cherry Hill Mall in New Jersey that they actually had to reconfigure the structure of the mall because the Chick-fil-A from across the street was where the girls were being snatched. If you can imagine, I found that horrifying. And they take them from the most vulnerable of all populations. These are all statistics varying from, but the U.S. Department of Justice, the definition is human trafficking is defined as the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons by improper means, such as force, abduction, fraud, coercion, abuse of power, position for an improper purpose, including forced labor and sexual exploitation. Human trafficking is the second largest criminal activity behind drugs, which is $150 billion industry a year. 99 billion is from sexual exploitation. Excuse me. The average age, as I said, is 11 to 13. Traffickers use force, fraud, coercion to control them. They look for people who are susceptible for a variety of reasons, including psychological, emotional, vulnerability, economic hardship, lack of social safety net, natural disasters, or political instability. I saw a report. I've seen a lot of girls speak on it, and one girl, they use all kind of fraud. She wanted a music contract, and she went, and eventually they groomed her, and they start to groom people, and just like they do in this country, and they from a very young age, and then they cannot leave. And as far as the labor, they will become indentured servants, as in the olden days. They will take all their identity. They will not let them go. And these are forced farm workers too, all over the world. And they have no citizenship. They'll say your debt's still not paid, your debt, and that's how they force and coerce them into all kind of acts. But the U.S. Department of Justice says 83% of sex trafficking victims identified in the U.S. were citizens, U.S. citizens. So traffickers prey on people with little or no safety net. They mainly include runaways and homeless youth, children in a foster and child welfare system. And that's horrifying to me. I had a girl, I used to transport and work with girls from an agency called Community Treatment Solutions. And she had become a recruiter. She was in a program to get help herself, but prior to that, she was recruiting girls to do the same thing because they figure they're moving up that way. And I said, why did you? And she was like 17 at the time, brilliant girl, but she saw that as her way to have mobility, you know, to be more important in her role. It includes immigrants, unaccompanied foreign national children, Native Americans, and those from Asian Pacific, those with substance abuse disorders, people with disabilities, and transgender people are very high. The LGBTQ communities are all targeted. They're just targeted. And so I was thinking of you, Susanna, of different things that we've talked about, you know, over the years, because in my profession, I work with girls who've been trafficked. And I wanted to mention that sexual abuse, it's just so rampant in the homes that I think a lot of people have been abused to begin with, and then they go into a system where they're trapped and they can't get out of it. That's been my experience. So, like I said, I worked at Community Treatment Solutions and so many other places. The Legacy victims are everywhere. You may see people in malls. I was thinking of you, Susanna, because of your traveling and where you are. You are in a good position to actually look for people, and you can see they're very disheveled on the plane. They're very, very fearful. There are lists of so many of the traits that but they won't make eye contact. They will, you can almost spot them, and that's how you can maybe report it to anybody who would listen. You know, I was thinking of you being in airports going back and forth. If you've ever seen anything suspicious, you know, there's many, many places to call. So the warning signs are their demeanor, they appear fearful, depressed, submissive, inability to make eye contact, a scripted story, lying about age, false IDs, presence of overly controlling or abusive boyfriend, non-control of his or her own identification, no documents, no passport. They're not free to leave or come or go as they please. Injuries or sign of physical abuse, they brand them, they mark jewelries or tattoos. Having excessive amounts of cash is also a warning sign. Unaware of their surroundings, not allowed to or be able to speak for themselves. Oftentimes they won't even let them speak. So there's a lot of agencies that are, hold on, trying to do something about it. If you Google it, there are so many agencies that are on top of it. One is called the Blue Heart Campaign, and the top 3 states for trafficking are Nevada, Mississippi, and Florida. Florida is, oddly enough, Jersey and Pennsylvania were way down on the list, 41 and 43. But I find that a little bit suspicious because wherever you look, everything varies. But this Blue Heart Campaign is excellent. And they also have a national task force. Each agency, each state has a task force. The other things I wanted to hit on were what you can do. Interesting enough, they say that the victims are in plain sight. I think in Florida, they're everywhere. I think they're in restaurants. They might be forced to be servers, but they're also prostituting. I think they're in bars, massage parlors. I mean, these people are trapped. They cannot get out of their surroundings. That's what I learned. And again, it could be any race or gender, how they operate. Traffickers prey on people with little or no social safety net, signs, recognizing indicators. I mean, they will look, I mean, I guess if they're working, they don't look disheveled, but if they're traveling with them and they have no papers or identity, or they cannot, no passport. There was a girl in the class I was taking with the lady in Florida, and she said that her daughter was on a plane with somebody, and she identified her as a person being trafficked and reported it, and she got her off the plane. So anyway, labor or services indicate it was the person recruited for one purpose, or forced to engage in some other job? Is the person's salary being garnished? Because they take all their money. That's one of the ways they control them. They have no money to travel anyway. And control indicators, is that person in possession of his identification? Has the person or their family been threatened and with harm? Is the person fearful, timid? Has the person been threatened with deportation or law enforcement? Living condition indicators, the person lacks material possessions oftentimes, and do they have freedom of movement? Can the person freely leave where they live? Has the person been deprived of food, water, sleep, medical care, or other life necessities? So the way you can help, I think, is to report it. What we can do, know the signs. There are there's a toll-free number in the United States you can call. There's a National Human Trafficking Resource Center, and the number, I have the number if anybody wants it. Get help and connect with a life service provider, provide information on potential human trafficking activity, and learn more by requesting training, technical assistance. I think the main thing to take away is that it's everywhere, and it's not just one place, and it can happen to anybody or anybody's family. I mean, literally people can be snatched, and it's people that, I think it's poverty is one of the most pervasive, precursors to it, because people are desperate to get help. But this girl, I think the woman who has the agency in Florida, I think her sister might have been dating the guy, and that's another way. They seduce these young girls and then they get them into their life. So that's pretty much it. Every single state, I think, has a task force. Pennsylvania is really, really very active in it. There's a lot of agency numbers that you can call, and there's a lot of statistics that she passed down. Like I said, again, I was in Florida. Interestingly enough, the Catholic Church has gotten very involved in this. The presentation I saw was, there is an organization, a task force in Orlando, Florida, and it makes sense because it's a hub of transportation all over the world. So they snatch people a lot, but it's modern day slavery. It's the second largest. That I find that appalling. The second largest business, and there is a Safe Harbor Act. Obama passed more acts. There's a blue. If you go on the computer, there's so much information about each state. But the one thing I think that Obama was very active in, if you go onto the computer and you Google the Blue Heart campaign, it's an international anti-trafficking campaign started by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, and it was started in 1997. It's supported countries in implementing the UN drug protocols, but in 2000, after the UN General Assembly adopted the protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in person, they became the guardian that produces the protocol and assumed the functions of fighting against human trafficking. The Blue Heart campaign was launched in March of 2009 by the executive director of the UNODC. During his address to the World Women's Conference in Vienna, the campaign symbol is a blue heart. The Blue Heart campaign uses its website as well as Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Flickr to communicate. And again, the top 3 states are Nevada, Mississippi, which I don't understand. I get Nevada because it's Las Vegas, but I don't get Mississippi, Florida, and this key sign. So Obama passed legislation while he was in office, but that's pretty much it. And the organizations that I wanted to plug were Brandy's, and I have information if anybody in Amnesty wants to contribute to that. And the one that I work for was Community Treatment Solution, and a lot of these safe houses that the girls are in were just because of that. I worked for an agency That was the agency, and the program was BASE. I don't think they have it anymore, but it's building and surviving, building and assessing safe surroundings or something like that. So anyway, that's pretty much it. And my own personal experience is that when people have been abused, they do not want to talk about it. So I think that many people who have already been sexually abused by predators, and that could be anybody in their home, stepfather, father, brother, anybody, they're more susceptible. And I'm not saying that's all that's trafficked, but I think it's a large amount of people in my experience. So the agencies, I just want to plug her agency. She's fabulous. She has these girls that have been living in horrific conditions, and they, like I said, they've been sold at least 30 times a day. And some of them don't survive, and as her sister tragically died. So that's pretty much it. I have phone numbers, I have cards. If you go on, the Blue Heart campaign gives out little cards and information to pass out. But the main thing is, I think, to hubs, if they could put more people in the airports to, traffic this, to police it, maybe they wouldn't take as many people or be able to transport people from place to place, because it can be that once they get them, they keep them in one place, but they transport them all over the globe to do the slave labor. So that's pretty much.
Here in Puerto Rico, where I am is very much a tourist destination.
Right.
And there probably are a lot of prostitutes. I just haven't noticed. It doesn't mean they're not there. It just means that I haven't figured it out. But there probably are plenty. Yeah.
I really think, like my story with the girl, I met this young girl at the mall who's 31 years old, had no idea. One of the first things she said to me was, I was sexually abused. That's why I'm doing this, to help other people. And it's been my experience. This is what I can just talk forever on without any notes, is people will either tell you right away, or they will not tell you at all, or they'll hide it. And they're very, very good at hiding it because they live that way. And men, in my experience, in 30 years of mental health, the men that I've had that have been sexually abused will tell me right up front, and then they don't want to revisit it. It's almost like the shame of it, they bury it. Where the women do want to discuss it once they've disclosed it. They might take a little longer, but then they want to discuss it and work through it. And I have many girls. You can work through it, but to be honest with you, I don't think it ever really goes completely away. And now that they've come up in mental health with a term called there's PTSD and there's complex PTSD. But the people with complex PTSD are living their lives, but they're going through these motions. They suppress a lot of emotions. They act out in several ways. People either become too hypersexual, or they don't have sex at all. That's what I say. But the abuse is definitely, I think some of the traffickers have been abused from a very young age, in my opinion. I didn't see any statistics on that. But there's a task force for practically every state. It's becoming recognized. 40 million people a year. Where are they? That's the thing. They're hiding in plain sight. Where are these people? Like, how do we see them? But you have to be really astute. Even people, I think the food industry, they work a lot in waitressing, hosting, things like that, bars, and they just put them. Then there's also, I forgot to mention, a woman that is a magnificent speaker and advocate. Her name is Christine Kane. She is a Christian writer and speaker. Her first book was Unstoppable. She begins with saying there were these people that they literally pulled out of the ocean in pods. And they said to Christine, why did you take so long to rescue us? Because, of course, some of them died. She has and began an organization, I think it was 2018 or 19. It's called, sadly enough, A 2021, A21, and she wanted to abolish human trafficking by the year 2021. And that's sadly enough, it's still going, but she has organizations in all the stand countries, what used to be like the Middle East, what we call, she has many, many agencies all through there, and she has saved a lot of girls' lives, but she's still working on it. Christine Kane, and she's such a phenomenal speaker. She's devastating. The things that she's seen are just unbelievable, and she just keeps working at it, and she's a renowned speaker. So that's pretty much what I have with that. If you have any questions.
It seems to me that forced child marriage is connected with this. I told you before we started the recording that today in Australia, a woman was convicted of selling her 20-year-old daughter to an older man who gave her $10,000. And she was convicted even though the jury wasn't told that the man had actually murdered the daughter. So it was even more horrific story. I mean, but
that would be considered trafficking. She actually trafficked her own daughter, because even though it was for a legal marriage, she got money for it, and that would be considered human trafficking. So she could also be convicted.
Weren't marriages always had dowries? I mean, a dowry, I mean, it's a kind of a cute term, but you're essentially selling.
In India, I think it's India.
I think it was everywhere. I mean, Britain used to do that. They called it something else. So the dowries are, I mean, this is an old story. I know in some states there's no minimum age for marriage. And I've read some awful stories of these young women who were raped by an older man, and then the parents forced her to marry the man when she was pregnant, because that way the older man doesn't get arrested. I mean, the whole thing is just awful. But you have these people as clients, though, don't you? You have people who have pretty horrific stories.
The people that I work with were mostly at a place called Community Treatment Solutions, and they partner with Legacy, which is in Burlington County. What I do now, oddly enough, is a child organization where I work, but I have 3 adults with horrific stories also. And I can tell you that, in my opinion, the traumatic stress is always there. The girl that I spoke to from Helpline today, she said it never goes away, the panic attacks. But the sad part of the indentured, the labor part, is some of them don't ever survive past a certain age. Even the men, I mean, I focused on the women because that's more my knowledge base, but the men, she specifically said that they get men and they are forced into like working in the fields for the rest of their lives, because they'll just keep telling them your debt is not paid. And the immigrants, so we're fighting so hard over what to do with the immigrants. They take a lot of these people. And the reason that a lot of the people in Texas and that area, my son just came back from Texas, hate the immigrants is because they will work for less money, but that's work. But a lot of them are for this. I don't know as much about the labor force, I honestly say, but it's forced labor, and it's all over. I think that as far back as picking the oranges from years, I think they always did it, but now it's like anything else. Now they're putting a name to it. Whereas before we've had these atrocities and they didn't particularly name it. But yeah, most of my experience has been with women, but men who've told me. I mean, I had a man in my office one time for this agency I'm working for now, and he started to say that he was raped by somebody when he was 9, right in front of his adopted daughter. And I said, well, let's take her out first. And people want to tell you their story. That is one thing. That's one thing we could do. for people aside from giving money and knowing the signs. I think to be able to reach one person is a blessing. I really do. If you can make a connection, and that's the sad thing about mental health. Once the insurance is gone, I lose people. This is going to go on a tape, but I keep in touch with them anyway, whether I'm getting paid or not, because that's what I believe that you should do. You know, if they trust you, if somebody trusts you with that kind of background, that's a blessing, and you just can't let that go. So I do what I feel like I need to do to help people.
Yeah,
So that's it, pretty much, you know. I mean, there's so many facts and statistics and everything about, you know, what we're doing, but I think that lady who survived her sister's death and it started an organization to help other people, she's amazing. She's just an amazing person. Her name is Brandy Christofoli.
Okay. One thing I know about working with refugees and going to various places is the first thing you notice is the refugees who are processed are mostly men. So what happens to the women? Women are, I mean, I've heard that in Nigeria, women are offered these great jobs in Italy, and they go to Italy and they're prostitutes. You know, they get caught into these rings. And it can't just be Nigeria. I mean, it must be everywhere.
So you think that they sell the women and keep the men in other roles in various countries?
No, the men seem to be able to. It's easier for men to get refugee status and and get visas to come into the United States. Yeah. And I'm not quite sure why that is.
No, I don't. I'm not.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm not as familiar of how, but they do keep them. One of the definition pieces of the definition is it doesn't have to be from country to country. It can be that they're indentured, but they're in the same country that they were born and raised in.
Yeah, and that's pretty awful.
But that's what you experience.
If that's what's happening in the United States, that's really pretty shocking. But I can remember, I mean, when I was young, they were called runaway girls, and it was their fault, and how dare they do this to the men. And it's like the 180 where suddenly it's like, oh, wait a minute, these were children who were taken.
There's so many stories on the internet. I read something in researching this, is that a girl was talking about her teacher, and it was in Mexico. It was her grade school teacher, and she finally told the class what had happened to her, and she was just there looking for somebody, and they snatched her, and she was forced into sex slave trafficking for years and survived it. To survive it, I'd be interested, and I did not. I regret that I didn't research more the statistics on survival, because just to survive is a miracle. Christine Kane talked about what she has seen in various countries, and I swear, to me, she's a saint. She said they have this thing in, I forget what country. I don't want to mispronounce. You would know them. All the stand countries, I call them. That's where she does most of her work. And she said they have this thing called the merry-go-round. Well, they will take a girl, and they're on the rooms, and they take them out of one room and force them into another room, just like a merry-go-round. And then this is the most horrific part. And to be honest with you, I didn't even finish the rest of her lecture when she said this. They take the babies that are born from those transactions, and they put them in porno pictures. They snatch the babies from these girls that are forced to do this merry-go-round business, and then they take them and put them in pornography. I mean, where does child pornography come from? It's all over. That's another big, huge industry, child pornography. So they snatch people. But when she said that, I was at a talk she was given. I just left. I mean, I literally almost didn't take the job from CTS at the time because the girls in the audience that were going to become workers were trained so the stories were so horrific. Well, this parent gave them away at 9 and that person sold them. I mean, poor people will sell their children anywhere in America, in Mexico, in Cozumel, anywhere. Poor people will sell their children to survive. India. But a lot of these people, I think, are sold and taken. So it's pretty horrific. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know how to get the word out to let young girls be careful, like even the Cherry Hill Mall. I was horrified when she said that they were actually taking girls. She said they restructured the mall. There's no more Chick-fil-A there because they were snatching girls from Chick-fil-A, which was right across the street from Cherry Hill Mall. So that's pretty scary.
So she said she'd actually seen this happen. She'd actually seen
What's
this
that?
happen.
Yeah.
She'd actually
Well, I don't know.
seen this.
She saw it. No, she didn't see it. And she was friends with a man who was a police official on the task force, and he told her that's going on right in New Jersey.
Right. Oh, the police know about it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. The police, there's so many task force that are, that are pursuing these, but I guess it's not enough, or I just think that they're real savvy, the criminals. There's a show out called I always call the wrong thing. It's either Sound of Freedom or Sound of Fury, where Jim Cazabel, who's played Jesus, he goes to another country to get these children back. There are a lot of movies about it. So, but I don't know. I just feel passionate about helping individuals just to get up in the morning. Can you imagine like 30 times a day? Most people would just want to kill themselves, I think, just give up. But this woman, she's doing amazing work down in Florida. And oh, interestingly enough, in Florida, it comes a lot from the Catholic community. And from the Diocese of Orlando, they have started a whole task force. And again, Orlando, and everybody thinks Orlando, Mickey Mouse, Disney World, it's so much fun. Right next to Orlando is Kissimmee, and it's dire poverty. People live in hotels. So go figure. That's probably where a lot of it comes from. And that's probably, they say that Florida is a no tolerance state. They have very strict laws. Very strict laws. So, yeah.
So how long have you been a therapist for troubled people?
Well, I guess I've been in it 30 years, my whole career, but actually, when I first started, it was a place called Burlington County Family Service, which is now called Twin Oaks or Integrated Twin Oaks. I was doing a group with quite a few people, and a girl came to me and she said, well, in the group she was saying, as I said, some people are very blatant about it, that she had been raped from her father from the time she was small. And oftentimes the tragedy is the mother will not believe it.
Right.
Oftentimes the mother is also very mentally and physically abused. And so she didn't believe her. I remember I went to my supervisor and I said, what do I do? I was new at it. And there was a book, I don't know if I still have it. It was written by a woman who worked under Jimmy Carter, and she was a high-powered lawyer at the time, and she started to have a breakdown, flashback. She couldn't remember what had happened to her. The name of the book is called Reach for the Rainbow, and I think her name was Lynn Feeney. She was abused by her multi-personality father, who had also been abused, and it was the most horrific thing I'd ever read. But she breaks everything down chapter by chapter as to what people go through, even like having sexual relations again. She was the most specific person, and her father went into a Nazi personality and tortured and raped her. But she had become a lawyer under Jimmy Carter. That's how long ago it was. And that was about 30 years ago in the 90s when I first, and ever since then I've been researching sexual abuse. And all I know is there's so much of it and people just hide it. And you would never think it of most people. And I know the signs, but I've been working with it for 30 years. So
we had a talk about 5 years ago from he was a former priest, and become therapist, and he was working with people in prison. He said every single person in prison was
absolutely.
sexually abused.
Absolutely. I totally believe that.
It was like, my gosh.
And the statistics in men, and they're still, interestingly enough, I believe, again, it's just a core belief, that men are much more secretive about it, that they don't really want to disclose. So the people that I've had disclosed right away, but they didn't really want to go into any of the details or talk about it. Whereas women will eventually, sometimes they hide it too, but eventually they'll come through, and the symptoms are so pervasive, and they say in mental abuse, the worst kind of abuse is emotional. I kind of believe that, because one of the girls I had she said things that will never leave my mind, that her stepfather said to her stepsister, they were all kids and they were looking at this fence, and it was an electric fence, and he said to her, why don't you go put your tongue on that fence and see what happens? And fortunately, the fence was de-electrified at the time. The other thing that girl told me about was that he made her grow her hair down to her ankles, and that she decided to cut it when she was 13, and she did, and he threw her down the steps and beat her. And worse than the beatings is somebody not believing you or somebody not validating you. If your parent doesn't validate you and they know the other parent is doing it, I think that does more emotional damage than the actual acts itself, because people need to be validated and believed. So that was all anonymous. I probably went into too much detail of different things people have told me, but so be careful what you do with the tape.
Susanna, you're muted.
Yeah.
It was yeah, don't identify anyone, but you have it, and that's really great. Michael, do you have any? Michael, do you have any questions?
Probably not today, but I probably will at some point.
Yeah. Okay, I guess we'll stop the recording. Thank you very much, Donna Hilburn Campbell, for talking to Amnesty International 1112 in Philadelphia.
Thanks, Donna.
Thank you. Thank you.